this is the key, and this is the beautiful thing about this, is that when you have earned the trust on one family, you have earned the trust on an entire community.
Because the management and transparency is what's very important. So once you submit a referral, you're going to have your own Home Advantage account, and it's going to tell you where everything sits. So if you have 10 referrals that you've sent into the network, it's going to give you all 10 referrals. It's going to tell you every milestone that that client is sitting in, whether they're touring homes, whether they're in escrow. And you now can manage through the Home Advantage application as far as what your pipeline looks like for the referrals that you've sent. And so it's pretty sophisticated, and it's all click of a button, guys.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our session today. We are coming to the community of LabCoatAgents with an amazing webinar for you today. I would like to briefly introduce myself before we get into our session today of the big disconnect, how to tap into a forgotten community within the real estate world. Good morning for many, good afternoon for some. My name is Shaniqua Badger. I am your host and moderator for today's session. I am also a moderator for LabCoatAgents, the community at large in the Facebook group. And also when I'm not moderating LabCoatAgents, I am also transacting and selling real estate in the other city by the bay, Oakland, California, with the Badger Real Estate Group. So again, good morning and good afternoon for many of you. I want to just go ahead and do a little housekeeping. I understand we have about 30 minutes, so we're gonna rock and roll through all of these questions that we have, and then if we have any questions, I think Jake is going to help us moderate any questions that we have towards the end of this segment. So with that being said, I'm going to yield the floor to our speaker today, our illustrious speaker today. She comes with 19 years of experience, and I'm going to allow her to introduce herself and give us 2 minutes of who you are and what you do and why you're here.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here today. My name is Marisol. I am a real estate agent in the Central Florida area. I didn't always start as a real estate agent. I moved to this country 30-something years ago without being able to speak the language. So that's one of the reasons I am passionate about making that connection culturally between non-speakers and speakers and agents to tap into the community. Half in between my career, I left real estate, I went to timeshares, I learned how to sell, and I put everything together, and here we are today.
Well, awesome. Well, let's get right into it, because I think people are excited to hear this subject matter, this topic. It's a topic that we probably should be talking about a little bit more than we actually do, but we're here now talking about it, so let's get right into it. So I really want to start off with some on-the-surface barriers. We're talking about barriers for Hispanic homeowners, home buyers. What are some on-the-surface barriers that you see in your day-to-day business when interacting or transacting with buyers and sellers in the Hispanic community?
I will say two main ones. One is language, of course, and we're talking Spanish, but in the Hispanic culture, language is more than Spanish. And I say that because you may be a Spanish speaking agent and having some barriers with that client, and it's as simple as Hispanics and Latino buyers, which we use both two terms, so they're basically the same, are big on trust. So trust, we are taught on trainings and so forth, earn the trust in certain ways. With the Hispanic client, you're earning that trust from the first conversation until way up after closing. So it's a continuous thing, but language is one of them. Spanish is one. So if you don't speak the language fluently, it'll be nice to partner with someone that does. And the second one is information. They don't know how the process works. They need to be educated on the process, and it takes time. They may not when you're talking to them, and you may assume they understand you. We understand you. I was there one day. And the reality is that's part of the culture. It's a culture of inclusion, which means they may not have a clue of what you're saying, and you're going to be seeing this.
Oh, I think that's a great place for us to start with the barriers of understanding, that language being one of them and information being another one of them. So based on those two barriers, what systems do you use to help buyers and sellers navigate around those barriers?
Well, in my case, it's easier, I have to say, because I speak the language. And someone once told me many years ago, never forget where you came from. And when I came to this country, I didn't know the language. So all the barriers that I encountered trying to communicate, trying to understand, I use them now. I put myself in their feet. Let's just put it this way. It's about walking a mile in someone else's feet, but you need to never assume that you know where they're coming from. Because it's not going to be until deep in the relationship when they're going to be truly trusting you. So at the beginning, it's just going to be so much surfacing. So in reality, you may think you got it, but you don't. And sometimes what happens is that you'll have agents saying, well, they're ghosting me. Well, you never made that connection. That's why.
Connection is a human thing for sure. And I think we as agents, practitioners, whether you're a broker, agent, loan officer, that connection to people is so very important. I really want to dive into kind of the numbers around Hispanic homeownership, if I can. NAREP, which is a great organization, one of the minority trade organizations for those who do not know, publishes numbers around the space of homeownership every year. And they report a year-over-year growth in Hispanic homeownership numbers. What do you see helping to improve those numbers in the Hispanic community?
Is hands-on, is getting in touch with the community. They must see you as a part of the community. And of course, information, education, because most people don't know that they can afford to buy a home. They're not aware of all the financial assistance that it's available to them. The numbers will keep on increasing. I mean, right now we have 7.9 Hispanics mortgage ready. That was 2022. That's 7.9. That's a lot of people. And then in addition to that, we have 2.8 that are near mortgage ready, meaning they're almost there, not quite. They just need that helping hand that will take them there.
So in understanding the importance of knowing the mortgage ready segment versus the almost mortgage ready or the near mortgage ready segment, how are you staying relevant in this ever-changing environment of real estate to make sure that those people who need your services, that you're always top of mind with them?
Well, the first part is identifying them. And by identifying, I'll say that you need to always listen to the words that are not spoken, because there's usually always fear behind being that first-time home buyer. And I say the words that are not spoken because they will let you know in many ways that they want to buy. and you connect them with a financial advisor, or I should say mortgage person, that can help them. Of course, hopefully it's a person that can speak the language, because you're talking numbers. So that's extremely important. And then is usually, as crazy as it sounds, is building that confidence in them. There's so much fear. I've had transactions, and I remember one specifically that it was up to the closing day, where there we are about to close. And this sweet lady, she's hugging me and she's saying, "Are you sure that this is going to happen?" So, and she's been educated throughout, she knew it, but that's when now we come, because what happens is that in the Hispanic community, they see figures, professionals, as figures of authority, which means when they see us, we're seen at a largest degree. That usually is not the case with the general American population, but in the Hispanic community, you're seen, you're it. So these people are putting all of their trust and confidence in you at that point. And I'll say the price tag is higher for you. And by that, I mean, you better not fail them. We better not, because they have basically, when they get to that point of fully trusting you, I mean, they really trust you. They really, really trust you. And what I tell people all the time is, please don't let them down. If you cannot be there for them around the clock, literally, I mean, by now I joke to them and I said, you can call me at 2 o'clock, but please know that I won't answer at 2 o'clock. I will answer in the morning, but be there. Be there.
And I love that because people don't realize how much of a skill confidence really is. It's a skill many times that we have to learn, even in the areas of being business owners. So imagine what it's like for people who are entry-level buyers trying to find their way in a very daunting process that seems very big without the right amount of help. So I applaud you for that. What are the ways that you're investing back into your community? I understand that there's a lot of person-to-person relationships that you're building. Is there any specific events that you're hosting? Is there anything beyond the man-to-man or person-to-person relationship that you're building?
Well, there is. We are about to be planning a first-time home buyers seminar, but it's all in Spanish. But in addition to that, and this is the key, and this is the beautiful thing about this, is that when you have earned the trust on one family, you have earned the trust on an entire community. So their extended circle, you have them all. You are going to be invited to their events. They have a charity event that they care for. You are going to be there. They're going to invite you and they expect you to be a part of it because it's family. And family is there for family. That's the way it's seen. So it's not just what interests you, but it's also what interests them.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I have been invited to a few baptisms.
Yeah. Yeah, everything.
And christenings.
Yes. And you go to weddings and the birthdays.
And the quinceañeras, yeah.
But there is this festival. But you know what? I mean, never see it as, oh my goodness, another thing on my list. For example, a festival. Well, you know what? Go to the festival, get involved with the management or the leadership on that festival and make it happen, because we should always have a mentality of service.
Yes, yes, I love that. So with you having such a heavy focus of the Hispanic segment of buyers and sellers, where do you see your company or your business in the next 10 years?
Well, what I want is to help, and what I would love to do is to help train other agents, kind of clone myself to a certain extent, so we can serve as many people as possible. You know, right now, I would love to be able within the next 10 years to serve at least 1,000 families. But 1,000 families is not just business, it's not just houses, it's relationships and building bridges with the community.
Yeah, I love that too. You know, we talked about many times barriers being on the surface. So can you get a little bit deeper other than on the surface? Because I think people need to understand that, you know, I hear a lot of conversations of all you have to do is, and sometimes it's not that simple, right? Is there any times that you're seeing family members who are dealing with, or family members or community members, buyers, sellers, you know, et cetera, who are dealing with bias, redlining, steering, those things that go against what we see for fair housing?
Well, in my case, luckily enough, I am in Central Florida. And by that, I mean, we have it's a huge Hispanic population. And so basically you have Hispanics in every area. That's what I'm trying to say. So I have heard that in some areas, mostly in the renting arena, that tends to happen a bit more. I don't do renting, so I'm glad to a certain extent because of that. And that's why it is so important to educate the community, to let them know, you know, you can buy, there's no need to rent. And reality right now, with so many assistance that is being provided, that is the case. So they don't have to put themselves into that situation. And the renting, it may happen primarily with solo renters, meaning, you know, we're not talking a big company, property management companies, that doesn't usually happen, or apartment complexes, that doesn't happen. It's more with the lone owner of a property, because owners of properties they just want to know who they get into their home, and that's the area in which biases do come out.
So private landlords is probably where you're saying
Yeah.
is where you would see the most biases coming from, not necessarily on the buyer seller level, but private landlords. Very interesting. So what do you know, we're having an interesting 2023. You know, we had an interesting 2022 as well.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
So we're having a really interesting 2023. What do you think the forecast is for, again, continuing to lower the barrier for Hispanic buyers and sellers in 2023?
Right now in my market, which is again Central Florida, the reality is and most of the country is in that situation, that there's not enough inventory. So that's a big one. But of course, that part is hard to control to a certain extent. But what are the areas that we can control? We go back to educating these buyers, educating them, because we do need more listings. But in the education part is because many of them do qualify for that assistance, and they may not think they will qualify, but once you provide that extra layer of help with the mortgage person, and all of a sudden you have all this down payment. Most of the time, most people think that is the down payment, that they do not have enough a down payment to be able to get into the home. That's the one thing that we can tear down, that wall, kind of, because we can show them, yes, you can do it. There's programs we can negotiate with the seller, of course, to help with those closing costs, to buy down the interest, because interest rate is the second next concern. Is interest is too high. That can also be negotiated with a buy down, interest buy down.
So I'm writing all of this down because all of this is information. I'm a student as well, so I'm writing all of this information down. So I appreciate you sharing with us today. So we've been told to land the plane, which means we have to wrap this up within a 30-minute time period. So I'm not in the Facebook group, but Jake, are you in the Facebook group? Are you seeing any questions?
None yet.
Okay, so I also wanted to continue to expound on some of these questions because I think that this is so good that, you know, we could ask questions about this all the time. So when you first got into your business, was your focus mainly on growth of the Hispanic market or in real estate, or were you very broad in your approach?
No, when I first started, honestly, I had no idea what I was doing. So it was whatever comes, that's it. It so happens that my first listing was a Hispanic seller, you know, and it happened, actually, it was my son was 8, 9 years old at the time. And he, you know, he went to his Sunday school teacher and said, Mr. Roman, do you know anybody that wants to buy or sell a home? You know, so that's what happened. So that's how I ended up, how I began. But the reality was that when you are beginning, and we don't know what we're doing when we first start, it's like whatever it takes. It's been literally in the last few years that I've seen the need is so great because now we have so many more immigrants coming into the area. And like I served a couple recently, she was a doctor in Colombia, or she is a doctor. He is an engineer. They were from Colombia. They didn't know the language. They didn't have enough money for closing. In the meantime, he's working in maintenance at a hotel, and she's working at a hospice, basically helping patients. And she was at the bottom of the food chain. So it's really good to mention that, you know, never assume about people, because it is amazing, you know, because a Hispanic buyer, I'm mentioning buyer in this case because that's the first transaction that they will make, you know, they will do whatever it takes. He was working 2 jobs and she was working full-time with a little kid, crazy hours. They were not seeing each other. And the reason was, we need to have our home. We don't care what it takes.
So they removed all of the options.
Yep.
They said, this is our focus, this is our intention. Whatever it takes for us to get to that goal is what we're going to do. So they in turn ended up being very obedient and coachable, is what I always say.
Yes.
And I think that that's really important for us, is to be in a position where we can help them be coached. And so we have to take on that role of psychologist, coach, therapist, financial planner.
And that's a fine line. And I mentioned that because they didn't know the language. So they're trusting me for everything. And which is admirable, but scary at the same time. It's very scary because don't cross that. You need to make sure that everything is done to perfection and you're serving them properly. Because when there's something that needs to be translated, guess who's they're going to call, you know? So, but yes, they will trust you to the end, because at the same time, in the case of this couple, you're talking professionals. You know, they may not by any other means be having a similar job in here, but that's who they were. And they trusted, which goes back to the beginning when I mentioned that the Hispanic community, when a professional, they view it as a figure of authority. And they consider a real estate agent a professional. So I guess the weight is heavier on our shoulders.
Yeah, I would say that that is an interesting perspective, because I don't think that many real estate professionals see ourselves as leaders and teachers. but the public does many times. And so we have to show up in that role. So that's a great perspective. And I want to, if we don't have any more questions, I want to ask one more question before we close out. I want to leave this question specifically for you. What are you doing in your pastime that gives yourself a break from your pathway into increasing homeownership? What are the things that you do to help with your mental health, with your taking time off? What are the self-care things that you do for yourself?
Well, I meditate a lot and I read a lot. And actually what I've been doing lately is to speak about it. And that, because that for me is a break, because it's like, because real estate can be really stressful and overwhelming. And we don't have to be a one-man island, you know. We need to share these things so we can all benefit from each other and we can all grow together. And I do say, you know, life does happen, but we make the world a better place one person at a time. So if we can help, you know, the way I see it, if I'm helping one family, I like to teach one agent, kind of show one agent what's going on. And, you know, because at the end, we're all people.
Yes, I love that. And I wanted to ask that question because many times when we take on the role of service can be a very heavy and daunting task because we're taking on so many different energies, we're taking on so many different initiatives, we're pouring from our cup. And so I wanted to make sure that anyone that is in the area of service in this industry understands that, you know, there are ways that you can pour back into yourself so that you have enough to give to others. And I see that you're a person that gives to others. So who better to ask that question than you?
Well, thank you. And another way is, you know, you don't have to feel, the way I see it, you know, it's like a balance, a level, if you want to call it that way. If something is upsetting me, you know, it's not the transaction, it's not the client. There's something in me that I need to work with.
Yeah.
So it's an amazing opportunity to grow. And amazing. I tell people, you'll know really quickly in the business if you have a rejection issue.
Yeah, yes, you do. That's funny. Yes, you do.
And it's not them, it's us. That's it.
That is very funny because that is very true.
It is.
Yeah, I have to say thank you so much for joining us today. And before we land the plane, like I always like to say, how can people find you?
Well, my number, I can give you my number, which is 321-202-3776. My email is Marisol@G12 Professional Group. And you can text me. I mean, my website is g12professionalgroup.com. And we can schedule an appointment through Calendly and we can talk. I can help.
Okay, awesome. So thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a pleasure. Jake, we have no questions?
Nope.
Okay, so thank you so much for joining us today. That is what we call a wrap here at LabCoatAgents. Please make sure that you join us online. We have a Facebook group on Facebook called LabCoatAgents. So come and visit us and join us if you are in the area of real estate. We are also online at www.labcoatagents.com. And this is LabCoatAgents webinar focused on the science of real estate. So with that being said, thank you all. Goodbye.
Thank you.